What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and I have another player versus player versus player breakdown for you guys. So about a week ago, I compared the top 3 running backs this year in fantasy with Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Today, we are going to be doing a very similar video, but talking about some round 1 wide receivers. So we're going to be comparing Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Puka Nacua. These guys seem to be consensus going in like the wide receiver 2 through the wide receiver 4 bucket. We're going to be talking about their ADPs on a few different platforms, breaking each player down individually. And then towards the end of the video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on how I'd have them ranked and where I'd be willing to draft them. Now, like I said, I will be giving my opinion, but it's more so to get the information out there to you guys so you can feel confident with your early round pick if you are going to be targeting one of these wide receivers. So let's start off by looking at their ADPs on 4 different fantasy sites. We have Underdog, Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo. And actually across the board on all 4 sites, these guys are pretty segmented as like Jefferson, wide receiver 2, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 3, Puka Nacua, wide receiver 4. Justin Jefferson's ADP is 4.2, CeeDee Lamb's ADP is 6.2, and then Puka Nacua down at 9.2. Now, a little spoiler alert here, I am going to be making the case that I don't think it should be that clear in terms of ADP. Like, I don't think Justin Jefferson is the clear-cut wide receiver 2. I think you can, and I will make a strong case for someone else. And I also don't think like CeeDee Lamb should just be blowing Puka Nacua out of the water. So I do want to start here with Justin Jefferson, the consensus wide receiver 2. And in this graphic here, you can see Justin Jefferson's point per game numbers, his ranking from 2021 through 2024, and then some of the Vikings offensive statistics, including their 2025 projections. So Justin Jefferson, obviously, this excludes his rookie year just because he hadn't like fully broken out as a true high-end fantasy wide receiver 1. But you can see from 2021 through 2024, he's putting up 19.4, 21.7, 20.2, and 18.7 points per game. That's wide receiver 4, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 5, and wide receiver 3. And as you can see on the right side here, he's been playing on some very solid passing attacks. You can see 2021, arguably the worst season here. They were still top 10 in pass attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns. In 2022, they were top 3 across the board. 2023, another great season, top 4 across the board. And then 2024, their actual volume was a little bit down, 14th in pass attempts, but still ultra efficient. They were 3rd in passing yards and then 2nd in passing touchdowns. And so one real question that I do have here with Justin Jefferson is, he had a good year last year, right? 18.7 points per game, wide receiver 3, but it's not like this was a league-winning season out of him. Like 18 points per game is very solid, but this is not like the CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill seasons from 2023. This is not, comparable to Jamar Chase in 2024, where these guys are giving you 23 plus points per game at the wide receiver position. And so my question was, going from Sam Darnold, who maybe didn't have the craziest pass attempts, but was still very productive in terms of passing yardage, passing touchdowns, you're now shifting to a rookie quarterback who could be very volatile, right? JJ McCarthy could step in. He could be amazing. He could also step in and struggle, right? We've seen highly touted prospects. Caleb Williams last year, people thought he had a great situation, was going to come in, support these weapons. It didn't happen. People weren't quite as confident in Jane Daniels coming in, viewed as a worse offensive situation. He lights the NFL and fantasy on fire at the quarterback position. And so there are some concerns here with JJ McCarthy. Now, I did use Mike Clay's projections. He works at ESPN. Really solid resource. You can just look it up, get the PDF. And so he's actually pretty optimistic on how this Vikings offense is going to look. So he has them top 3 in pass attempts, 12th in passing yards, and then 5th in passing touchdowns. Now, if I had to make a call on whether or not I thought they were going to do better or worse than this projection, I'd probably say worse. Like, do I think O'Connell's going to want to have the 3rd most pass attempts for essentially a rookie quarterback? I don't think so, but I do think this projection just speaks to, pretty much how much of a quarterback whisperer Kevin O'Connell is, where he does take in Sam Darnold, where people thought he was washed, done in the NFL or, done as a starter. And then Sam Darnold comes in and is top 3 in passing yards and passing touchdowns for this Vikings offense. So it's certainly possible that Kevin O'Connell just completely elevates things for JJ McCarthy, but I do think the situation is a little bit more up in the air compared to the Cowboys offense or the Rams offense. Justin Jefferson is a player, obviously is elite. In his 3 17-game seasons, he's gone for at least 1,500 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns on nearly 10 targets per game. But something that I did mention earlier on, Justin Jefferson has not yet hit one of those just like nuclear wide receiver seasons where in the last 10 years, he has the 12th best fantasy season. You can see between Tyreek Hill and Antonio Brown in like that 21.7 range. But you've had guys like Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, 25 points. AB, I mean, man, dude was a monster twice here in the top 9. You have the CeeDee Lamb 2023 season, Chase from 2024, Tyreek Hill 2023. And so I understand this might feel a little bit nitpicky, but these are all elite options, so we do have to point it out. And the point I am trying to make here is that I do think Justin Jefferson has the talent to deliver one of these seasons. I'm sure when we look back at his career, he might have multiple seasons where he's like 23 plus fantasy points per game. But the question is this going to be the year where, once again, we reference some of those other offenses he's been on? He has not hit that, 22, 23 point per game number, being in an offense that's top 5 or top 3 across the board in attempts, passing yards, and touchdowns. And so is he going to provide that ceiling this year with a rookie quarterback? That's why I'm just not sold on him being like this clear-cut wide receiver 2, potentially being like a top 2-3 pick in fantasy drafts this season. Now, the next wide receiver I want to talk about is CeeDee Lamb. He's coming off a pretty disappointing 2024, drafted, as high as the wide receiver 1 overall, was coming off that wide receiver 1 finish that I just showed you guys. And he ends up being the wide receiver 7 at 17.6 points per game. Now, he did have some difference in his splits with and without Dak. He played 8 games with Dak at quarterback, averaged 18.77 points per game. Without Dak, was down at 16.46. And so when you compare Justin Jefferson, where I think people thought, he had a very solid season, compared to CeeDee Lamb, who people thought was a bust, in the games with Dak Prescott, paced over 17 games, Dak actually would have outscored Justin Jefferson by like 1.5 PPR points. So their production was pretty much the same. But I do feel like, the takeaway from last season is different. And I think it's just because we had CeeDee Lamb without the quarterback play from Dak Prescott. Like I mentioned, CeeDee Lamb has showcased that elite upside where in 2023 caught 135 passes for nearly 1,750 yards, 12 touchdowns, 23.7 points per game. That is the 12th best fantasy season of all time, and it is 8th best in the 21st century. And then I think an interesting addition to this offense is George Pickens. Now potentially has a real wide receiver 2 to take some of the pressure off him. This is pretty much the first time we've seen that since like 2021 in his second season with Amari Cooper. And like you can make the case that maybe that's going to take away some of his usage. Personally, I don't think so. Like this is a team that's going to throw the ball a lot. He was already going to be someone who commands volume with or without, other weapons around him. I just think this could help his efficiency and just raise the overall ceiling and floor of this Cowboys offense. Now, maybe you could argue it's bad if Dak gets hurt again, but that's not like the baseline expectation we're working with here. Now, the third wide receiver here, Puka Nacua, I think some people might view him kind of as like a distant wide receiver 4 where he's not really in contention. Personally, I think he firmly belongs in this discussion. This is a guy who in 2023 had the 3rd highest scoring rookie wide receiver season of all time. He was 9th on a point per game basis, 3rd highest in the 21st century. Then he fouls it up in 2024, is the wide receiver 2 at 18.8 points per game. And if he just did that in year 2, right, nearly 19 points per game, 2nd best wide receiver, I think you'd say that was a great season. He's actually better if you really dive into it because he injured himself week 1, played less than a third of the snaps, and then he was thrown out of their week 9 game, played 35% of the snaps. That's not something that you're going to anticipate happening every single season, right? You're not going into this year saying, all right, Puka's going to leave 2 games very early on. If you remove those 2 games, he would have been averaging 21.8 points per game, and I think he's just viewed in a completely different light. I do think one of the advantages you can get over your league mates and just in fantasy in general is kind of just understanding when dudes had random bad luck, where this is a thing that happened with T. Higgins over the last few years where he had been injured going into games or he'd leave early or they'd have him active and they just wouldn't play him. And so his fantasy point per game number looks bad, but it's that's not him actually going out there and struggling. That's just like him getting unlucky and getting banged up. And that was the case here with Puka Nacua. Now, what's really held Puka back is just the lack of touchdown upside. So in the last 2 seasons combined, Puka's been targeted 266 times. That is the 11th most in the NFL. He has scored 9 touchdowns, which is tied for 37th. Some of the other guys that he's tied with over the last 2 years, Gabe Davis, Alec Pierce, Jalen Tolbert, Dontavian Wicks. Like, it's just a completely different class of wide receiver, and I don't really get it. Like, it seems somewhat fluky because he's this big physical wide receiver. He's super effective after the catch. He seems like a target that like you'd be wanting to pepper in the red zone, but it just hasn't really come together. And something I'll mention in a little bit here, like Vegas also just thinks that maybe this is just kind of who he is and doesn't project him to have a big touchdown season. So that's really been the one red flag. And then also them bringing in Devontae Adams, who like is very established, great red zone threat. That's probably not going to help him out in the touchdown department. But now let's compare these 3 wide receivers. And as you can see here on the graphic, we have some of their betting projections, their over-under, so for receiving yards and receiving touchdowns, and then Mike Clay's team projections. So like what potential offenses are we looking at here? So starting off with Justin Jefferson, he does lead both of them in the receiving yardage prop. He's up at 1250, Lamb and Puka both at 1200. And then we see the big difference in the receiving touchdowns, where Jefferson, his over-under is set at 9.5, CeeDee Lamb at 7.5, and then like I mentioned, Puka Nacua all the way down at 5.5, which just seems very low for someone on a good offense and someone who's projected to have a lot of yardage, as you can see here at 1200. Then we look at the team projections. These 3 offenses all project very well across the board. So Jefferson mentioned this earlier, but 3rd in pass attempts, 12th in passing yards, 5th in passing touchdowns. Now, obviously, you might have your own takeaways. You might have your own opinions on whether you think these offenses are going to be worse, better, more pass heavy, more run heavy. But I do think getting some projections just gives us like a decent baseline. And then for the Cowboys, top 7 across the board in attempts, yards, touchdowns. And then for the Rams, 10th in pass attempts, 4th in passing yards, and 6th in passing touchdowns. So once again, for Puka, it's not even like we're projecting that this offense isn't going to do well or have a lot of passing touchdowns. It's just that Puka's just not the touchdown guy, I guess. And so my personal rankings as of right now, I actually have CeeDee Lamb pretty confidently as my wide receiver 1. Now, I'm not going to say there's a massive gap, but like when I'm on the clock and I'm choosing between these 3 wide receivers, I kind of pick him without having a ton of agony, right? Like I'm not super torn up about which guy I'm going to pick. Then I have Jefferson at number 2, but I've actually kind of become dangerously close to flipping him with Puka after the hamstring strain. And that's not because I'm super concerned about the hamstring. It's just that originally I felt like these guys were so close and just so like any potential lingering injury, minor concern could make the flip. As of right now, I still have Jefferson ahead. Now, when we start to add in some players at some other positions and, go through my overall player rankings, I have CeeDee Lamb as my 104. So I have Jamar Chase 101, I have Bijan 102, Gibbs 103. Just recently bumped CeeDee Lamb ahead of Saquon, who's my 105. Then I go Jefferson 106 and then Puka 107. So I guess compared to consensus, probably a little bit higher on Puka, who could be going 108, 109 on some platforms. Lower on Jefferson, where some people are going to be confident taking him 102, 103. I just can't quite get there. And then probably pretty in line with CeeDee Lamb, maybe a little bit ahead of consensus. But I feel like typically you see those running backs going like very early in the first round. In the running back comparison video I did a week ago where I talked about Saquon, Bijan, and Jahmyr Gibbs, I kind of referenced Saquon's potential usage concerns where he had a lot of overall touches last year. And typically you see those running backs, they're not going to improve or even stay the same the next season. They're potentially more likely to get injured or their production does kind of dip a little bit. And so I wasn't saying like Saquon's for sure going to fall off or the production's going to tank or that he's going to be, out for the season with some serious injury, but it's just a minor factor you have to consider. And so then I was looking at what I thought his ceiling was compared to Bijan and Gibbs, and I didn't feel like there was a massive difference, which is why I let that minor concern kind of move him down below those other 2. And that's kind of how I feel here with Justin Jefferson, where I'm not extremely concerned about this passing attack. Like I think Kevin O'Connell's going to have JJ McCarthy playing at a solid level. I think he's going to be serviceable. Even if he like individually is kind of struggling, I think the infrastructure around him is solid. They've improved the offensive line. He has really solid weapons. But then I just think about like the overall peak ceiling, and CeeDee Lamb straight up has the better season over Justin Jefferson, right? He's showcased that higher peak. Puka Nacua was in a spot last year where if he played a full healthy season, like could have rivaled Justin Jefferson's best season. So these guys are all great. And so the potential quarterback concern that I just don't have with a Dak Prescott or a Matthew Stafford is what kind of makes me a little bit lower on Justin Jefferson. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. Let me know your thoughts down below. How would you rank these wide receivers? Drop your top 3, or I guess top 4 with Jamar Chase at 101. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.